Welcome to Tech with Kaushik. This is part 5 of our complete practice question series for the AZ-900 Microsoft Azure Fundamentals exam. Choose your answer before the timer ends. Then review the correct answer, detailed explanation, and exam tip. Let us begin part 5. Let's work through question number 152. This one focuses on Microsoft Entra ID. First, let's review the situation. A company is comparing Microsoft Entra ID with Microsoft Entra Domain Services. For each statement, select yes if the statement is true. Otherwise, select no. The first statement says, Microsoft Entra ID is a cloud-based identity and directory service. The second statement says, Microsoft Entra Domain Services provides managed domain capabilities such as domain join and group policy. The third statement says, Microsoft Entra ID is the same as deploying traditional Active Directory domain services on customer-managed domain controllers. The first statement is yes. Microsoft Entra ID provides cloud identity, authentication, and access management. The second statement is yes. Microsoft Entra Domain Services supplies managed domain services without customers managing domain controllers. The third statement is no. Microsoft Entra ID is a cloud identity service and is not identical to customer-managed ADDS. Use Entra ID for cloud identity. Use Entra Domain Services when managed domain join, LDAP, Kerberos, or group policy capabilities are required. Take a careful look at question number 153. Look for the most important clue in this scenario. You need to run an automated deployment script while traveling. You only have access to a tablet running the Android operating system. Solution: you open a web browser on the tablet, sign into the Azure portal, open Azure Cloud Shell, select PowerShell, and execute the script. Does this meet the goal? See which choices you can rule out. Next, option A, yes. Next, option B, no. The right response is option A, yes. This is the best choice because Azure Cloud Shell provides an interactive, browser-accessible terminal hosted in the cloud. It is OS agnostic and accessible from a web browser on any device, including an Android tablet. You can select either a PowerShell or Bash environment within Cloud Shell. The remaining options can be eliminated because B, denying the validity, is incorrect because Cloud Shell requires only a modern browser and an active Azure subscription. Exam tip: Cloud Shell automatically authenticates you based on your current Azure portal session. Now let's examine question number 154. We are moving on to Azure Monitor. Let's start with the scenario. A security and operations team is reviewing Azure monitoring tools. For each statement, select yes if the statement is true. Otherwise, select no. Statement 1, Azure Monitor can collect metrics and logs from Azure resources. Statement 2, Application Insights is a feature of Azure Monitor that monitors application performance and usage. Statement 3, Azure Monitor alerts can use action groups to send notifications or start automated actions. Statement 1 should be marked yes. Azure Monitor provides a common platform for collecting and analyzing monitoring data. Statement 2 should be marked yes. Application Insights provides application performance monitoring and telemetry analysis. Statement 3 should be marked yes. Action groups define the notification and automation actions used by alert rules. Keep this point in mind for the exam. Application Insights is part of Azure Monitor and focuses on application performance monitoring. Here comes question number 155. Consider this situation. A cloud architect is explaining the benefits of cloud services to a new team. Match each cloud benefit to its corresponding description. Let's begin with the left side. Item 1 on the left is the ability to add or remove resources to meet changes in demand. Item 2 on the left is the ability to keep a service available when individual components fail. Item 3 on the left is the ability to forecast performance and costs consistently. Item 4 on the left is the ability to manage cloud resources through portals, command line tools, APIs, and automation. The right column contains choice A on the right is scalability. Choice B on the right is high availability. Choice C on the right is predictability. Choice D on the right is manageability. Use these pairings. Pair the ability to add or remove resources to meet changes in demand and scalability. Pair the ability to keep a service available when individual components fail and high availability. Pair the ability to forecast performance and costs consistently and predictability. Pair the ability to manage cloud resources through portals, command line tools, APIs, and automation and manageability. The main reason is scalability adjusts capacity, high availability reduces downtime, predictability improves planning, and manageability provides consistent tools for administration and automation. The main takeaway is cloud benefits include scalability, high availability, reliability, predictability, security, governance, and manageability. Question number 156 brings in a useful concept. This question takes us into pious concepts. Let's focus on the following scenario. A development team is deploying web applications to Azure App Service. For each statement, select yes if the statement is true. Otherwise, select no. Now check statement 1, a platform as a service, PaaS, offering normally gives customers administrative access to the underlying operating system. Now check statement 2, an administrator can increase the compute capacity of an Azure App Service web app by changing its app service plan. Now check statement 3. An Azure App Service web app can scale out to use multiple instances. For statement 1, choose no. The provider manages the operating system in a PaaS service. For statement 2, choose yes. Changing the app service plan can provide more compute resources. For statement 3, choose yes. App service supports horizontal scaling by running multiple instances. Here's a useful exam tip. PaaS customers manage applications and data. Microsoft manages the underlying operating system and physical infrastructure. Let's take a look at question number 157. Take a moment to review this scenario. A mission-critical application runs on Azure virtual machines. It must remain available if one Azure data center fails. Solution: deploy the virtual machines across 2 or more availability zones in the same Azure region. Does this meet the goal? Here are the possible answers. Option A is yes. Option B is no. The answer here is option A, yes. Availability zones are physically separate locations within an Azure region. Distributing virtual machines across zones reduces the risk that one data center failure will stop the entire application. Let's quickly check the incorrect choices. B. Rejecting the solution is incorrect because cross-zone deployment is designed to protect against a localized data center failure. A helpful shortcut is this. Availability sets protect against local hardware and maintenance failures. Availability zones protect against data center level failures within a region. Question number 158. The focus now shifts to Azure monitoring tools. A company is comparing Azure monitoring and optimization tools. Match each Azure tool to its primary purpose. Here are the items on the left. Left item 1, a service that analyzes Azure configurations and provides recommendations for cost, reliability, performance, and security. Left item 2, a feature that provides application performance monitoring and telemetry for live applications. Left item 3, a service that provides personalized information about Azure service issues and planned maintenance affecting your resources. Left item 4, a platform that collects, analyzes, and responds to metrics and logs from Azure resources and applications. Here are the possible matches. Right option A, Azure Advisor. Right option B, Application Insights. Right option C, Azure Service Health. Right option D, Azure Monitor. The matches work out like this. The correct match for a service that analyzes Azure configurations and provides recommendations for cost, reliability, performance, and security is Azure Advisor. The correct match for a feature that provides application performance monitoring and telemetry for live applications is Application Insights. The correct match for a service that provides personalized information about Azure service issues and planned maintenance affecting your resources is Azure Service Health. The correct match for a platform that collects, analyzes, and responds to metrics and logs from Azure resources and applications is Azure Monitor. Here's why. Advisor recommends improvements, Application Insights monitors applications, Service Health reports relevant Azure service events, and Azure Monitor is the broader telemetry platform. Advisor recommends, Service Health reports Azure service impact, and Azure Monitor observes resources and applications. Question number 159. Needs a little extra thought. Pay close attention to what the scenario really requires. A development team is selecting Azure storage services for different data types. Match each storage requirement to the appropriate Azure storage service. First, review these entries. Left side choice 1, object storage for large amounts of unstructured data such as images, video, and backups. Left side choice 2, managed file shares that can be accessed by using SMB or NFS protocols. Left side choice 3, message storage used for asynchronous communication between application components. Left side choice 4, a NoSQL key value store for structured non-relational data. Choose from these right side options. Right side choice A, Azure Blob Storage. Right side choice B, Azure Files. Right side choice C, Azure Queue Storage. Right side choice D, Azure Table Storage. Let's review the completed pairs. Match object storage for large amounts of unstructured data such as images, video, and backups with Azure Blob Storage. Match managed file shares that can be accessed by using SMB or NFS protocols with Azure Files. Match message storage used for asynchronous communication between application components with Azure Queue Storage. Match a NoSQL key value store for structured non-relational data with Azure Table Storage. Let's look at the reasoning. Blob storage handles unstructured objects, Azure Files provides managed file shares, Queue Storage stores messages, and Table Storage provides a schemaless NoSQL key value store. Exam tip. Azure storage includes blob, files, queue, and table services for different data access patterns. Let's continue with question number 160. Here's the situation to consider. You need to run an automated deployment script while traveling. You only have access to a tablet running the Android operating system. Solution: you open a web browser on the tablet, sign into the Azure portal, open Azure Cloud Shell, select Bash, and execute the script. Does this meet the goal? Let's compare the available options. Choice A, yes. Choice B, no. The best choice is option A, yes. This works because Azure Cloud Shell provides a browser-accessible terminal that offers both Bash and PowerShell environments. Because it relies only on a web browser, it fully supports Android tablets. Bash is capable of executing Azure CLI scripts. Here's why the alternatives are not suitable. B. Denying this solution is incorrect because Bash in Cloud Shell is fully supported via web browsers on mobile devices. Keep this point in mind for the exam. Cloud Shell maintains your files persistently in a dedicated Azure file share across sessions. See how you handle question number 161. Before choosing, identify the key constraint. An application must store large amounts of unstructured object data, including images, videos, and backup files. Which Azure storage service is designed for this requirement? Compare each option with the requirement. Consider option A, Azure Blob Storage. Consider option B, Azure Files. Consider option C, Azure Queue Storage. Consider option D, Azure Table Storage. In this case, choose option A, Azure Blob Storage. This is the best choice because Azure Blob Storage is object storage designed for large amounts of unstructured data such as images, videos, documents, and backup files. The other choices do not work because B, Azure Files provides managed file shares. C, Azure Queue Storage stores messages for asynchronous processing. D, Azure Table Storage stores structured NoSQL key-value data. The main takeaway is blob storage is for unstructured objects, files is for shared file access, queues is for messages, tables is for NoSQL key-value data. Now let's examine question number 162. Next, let's move into IaaS PaaS SaaS. First, let's review the situation. A development team uses a managed database service. The team manages its application and data, while Microsoft manages the underlying servers, operating system, and database platform. Which cloud service model does this describe? Now let's review the options. Option A is Infrastructure as a Service, IaaS. Option B is Platform as a Service, PaaS. Option C is Software as a Service, SaaS. Option D is Private Cloud. Go with option B, Platform as a Service, PaaS. The main reason is in PaaS, the provider manages the infrastructure, operating system, runtime, and platform. The customer manages the application and its data. A. In IaaS, the customer also manages the guest operating system. C. SaaS provides a complete application managed by the provider. D. Private cloud is a deployment model, not a cloud service type. Here's a useful exam tip. IaaS gives the most infrastructure control, PaaS manages the platform, SaaS provides a complete application. Let's work through question number 163. Take a moment to review this scenario. An IT team is organizing and governing Azure resources for a project. For each statement, select yes if the statement is true. Otherwise, select no. The first statement says, all Azure resources in a resource group must be deployed in the same Azure region as the resource group. The second statement says, tags applied to a resource group are automatically inherited by all resources in the group. The third statement says, a user assigned the contributor role at resource group scope can manage resources in that resource group. The answer here is no. A resource group stores metadata in a region, but its resources can be deployed in different regions. The answer here is no. Tags are not automatically inherited from a resource group by default. The answer here is yes. Azure RBAC assignments at resource group scope apply to the resources within that group. A helpful shortcut is this. Resource groups provide a lifecycle and access control scope, but they do not force all resources into one region. Here's an important one, question number 164. This question takes us into cloud benefits. The key situation is this. A company wants its cloud solution to continue functioning and recover when components fail. Which cloud benefit best describes this requirement? Focus on what separates these choices. Now examine choice A, reliability. Now examine choice B, scalability. Now examine choice C, predictability. Now examine choice D, manageability. The answer here is option A, reliability. Reliability is the ability of a system to recover from failures and continue to function as intended. Now let's rule out the other options. B, scalability is the ability to adjust resources to match demand. C, predictability concerns forecasting performance and cost. D, manageability concerns operating and administering cloud resources. Reliability focuses on recovery and continued operation. High availability focuses on minimizing downtime. Let's take a look at question number 165. Let's start with the scenario. An organization wants to evaluate Azure resources against organizational standards and enforce required configurations. Which Azure service should the organization use? Take a look at each choice. Choice A, Microsoft Purview. Choice B, Azure Advisor. Choice C, Azure Policy. Choice D, Azure Monitor. The right response is option C, Azure Policy. Here's why. Azure Policy evaluates resources for compliance with defined rules and can deny, audit, modify, or deploy required configurations. The remaining options can be eliminated because A, Microsoft Purview focuses on data governance, discovery, classification, and compliance. B, Azure Advisor provides optimization recommendations rather than enforcing organizational rules. D, Azure Monitor collects and analyzes telemetry and generates alerts. Exam tip. Use Azure Policy to enforce resource standards. Use Azure RBAC to control who can perform actions. Question number 166. Needs a little extra thought. We are moving on to Azure Service Health. Before choosing, identify the key constraint. An administrator wants to know whether an Azure outage or planned maintenance event affects the company's deployed resources. Select the appropriate service to complete the sentence. Now look at Statement 1. The Azure service that provides personalized alerts about service issues and planned maintenance affecting your resources is the blank. Your choices are 1. Azure Service Health, Azure Pricing Calculator, Microsoft Purview, or Azure Resource Manager? The answer for statement 1 is Azure Service Health. Azure Service Health provides personalized information about service incidents, planned maintenance, and health advisories relevant to an organization's resources. Keep this point in mind for the exam. Azure status is global. Service Health is personalized to your subscriptions and resources. Next, question number 167. Scenario. An enterprise architecture board has mandated a pass-first strategy for all new workloads migrating to Azure. The policy explicitly forbids the use of infrastructure as a service (IaaS) components for this specific project. Solution: to host the application and its data, you deploy an Azure App Service web app and provision an Azure virtual machine with Microsoft SQL Server installed on it. Does this meet the goal? Choices. Option A, yes. Option B, no. Go with option B, no. Let's look at the reasoning. While Azure App Service is a platform as a service (PaaS) offering, Azure virtual machines are classified as infrastructure as a service (IaaS). Deploying a virtual machine with SQL Server violates the strict pass-first policy requirement. Let's quickly check the incorrect choices. A. Approving this architecture is incorrect because it introduces IaaS components, failing the requirement to use only PaaS solutions. The main takeaway is to meet a strict PaaS database requirement, you would use a fully managed service like Azure SQL Database rather than installing SQL Server manually on an IaaS virtual machine. Now for question number 168. Next, let's move into authentication methods. Here's what is happening. A company is comparing authentication methods available through Microsoft Entra ID. For each statement, select yes if the statement is true. Otherwise, select no. Statement 1, Single Sign-On, SSO, can let a user access multiple applications after authenticating once. Statement 2, Multi-Factor Authentication, MFA, requires two or more forms of verification. Statement 3, Passwordless authentication requires the user to enter a password before using a passkey or biometric method. Statement 1 should be marked yes. SSO reduces repeated sign-in prompts across connected applications. Statement 2 should be marked yes. MFA combines factors such as something known, possessed, or inherent. Statement 3 should be marked no. Passwordless methods authenticate without requiring a traditional password. Here's a useful exam tip. SSO, MFA, and passwordless authentication solve different identity needs and can be used together. Next up is question number 169. Here's the scenario. A security administrator is rolling out Microsoft Entra Multi-Factor Authentication, MFA. For each statement, select yes if the statement is true. Otherwise, select no. Now check statement 1 to enforce Microsoft Entra Multi-Factor Authentication, MFA. An organization must synchronize its on-premises Active Directory identities to the cloud. Now check statement 2. Valid verification methods for Microsoft Entra MFA include SMS text messages, automated voice calls, and the Microsoft Authenticator app. Now check statement 3. Microsoft Entra Multi-Factor Authentication, MFA, can be enforced for both highly privileged administrators and standard end-user accounts. For statement 1, choose no. Cloud-only Microsoft Entra identities can use MFA. Directory synchronization is not required. For statement 2, choose yes. SMS, voice call, and Microsoft Authenticator are supported verification methods. For statement 3, choose yes. MFA policies can target privileged accounts and standard users. A helpful shortcut is this. MFA adds a second verification factor. It does not require an on-premises directory. Now for question number 170. The focus now shifts to storage access tiers. Here's what is happening. An organization retains historical compliance logs that are rarely accessed. Select the appropriate phrase to complete the sentence. The first one reads, data that is stored in the archive access tier of Azure Blob Storage. The blank. Pick from 1. Can be read immediately by applications, must be rehydrated before it can be read, requires a VPN before it can be accessed, or is automatically deleted after 30 days. Statement 1 should be completed with must be rehydrated before it can be read. Archive data is offline until it is rehydrated to an online access tier. Archive has low storage cost but higher retrieval latency and cost. Question number 171. Let's go. A team wants repeatable Azure infrastructure deployments. Select the appropriate tool to complete the sentence. Statement 1. The blank provide a declarative, code-based way to define and deploy Azure resources consistently. Choose between 1. Azure Resource Manager, ARM, templates, Azure policies, management groups, or availability zones. The first statement uses Azure Resource Manager, ARM, templates. ARM templates are an Azure native infrastructure as code option. Exam tip. Infrastructure as code defines the desired environment in files that can be versioned and reused. Question number 172. The difficulty level here is medium. Here's the scenario. An organization is comparing Azure networking services. Match each requirement to the appropriate Azure networking service. The left column contains left item 1, connect an on-premises network to Azure through an encrypted tunnel over the public internet. Left item 2, provide a private dedicated connection from an on-premises network to Microsoft Cloud Services. Left item 3, host DNS domains and resolve names by using Microsoft Azure infrastructure. Left item 4, connect to Azure virtual networks so resources can communicate privately. Now look at the choices on the right. Right side choice A, Azure VPN gateway. Right side choice B, Azure Express route. Right side choice C, Azure DNS. Right side choice D, virtual network peering. Here are the correct matches. Connect an on-premises network to Azure through an encrypted tunnel over the public internet goes with Azure VPN gateway. Provide a private dedicated connection from an on-premises network to Microsoft Cloud Services goes with Azure Express route. Host DNS domains and resolve names by using Microsoft Azure infrastructure goes with Azure DNS. Connect to Azure virtual networks so resources can communicate privately goes with virtual network peering. This works because VPN gateway uses encrypted internet-based connectivity, ExpressRoute provides private connectivity, Azure DNS hosts DNS zones, and peering privately connects virtual networks. Keep this point in mind for the exam. VPN gateway uses the public internet, ExpressRoute uses private connectivity through a provider. Here comes question number 173. Consider this situation. A company is comparing Azure application hosting and compute options. Match each requirement to the appropriate Azure compute service. Let's begin with the left side. Item 1 on the left is provides customer control over the operating system and installed software. Item 2 on the left is runs an isolated container without requiring the customer to manage virtual machines. Item 3 on the left is provides a managed platform for hosting and scaling web applications. Item 4 on the left is runs event-driven code without the customer managing servers. Choose from these right side options. Right option A, Azure Virtual Machines. Right option B, Azure Container Instances. Right option C, Azure App Service. Right option D, Azure Functions. Here are the correct matches. Pair provides customer control over the operating system and installed software and Azure virtual machines. Pair runs an isolated container without requiring the customer to manage virtual machines and Azure container instances. Pair provides a managed platform for hosting and scaling web applications and Azure App Service. Pair runs event-driven code without the customer managing servers and Azure functions. This is the best choice because virtual machines provide OS control. Container instances run containers without VM management, app service hosts web apps, and functions provides event-driven serverless compute. The main takeaway is compare compute by management responsibility. Virtual machines provide the most control, while app service and functions provide more platform management. Let's continue with question number 174. This question takes us into Azure Cloud Shell. Here's the situation to consider. An administrator needs an authenticated command line environment from a web browser without installing tools locally. Which Azure tool should the administrator use? Here are the possible answers. Choice A, Azure Cloud Shell. Choice B, Azure Advisor. Choice C, Azure Service Health. Choice D, Azure Policy. The best choice is option A, Azure Cloud Shell. The main reason is Azure Cloud Shell provides a browser-accessible, authenticated shell with Bash and PowerShell environments for managing Azure resources. Here's why the alternatives are not suitable. B, Azure Advisor provides optimization recommendations. C, Azure Service Health reports service issues and planned maintenance. D, Azure Policy enforces governance standards and assesses compliance. Here's a useful exam tip. Cloud Shell supplies browser-based Bash and PowerShell environments with Azure management tools available. Let's work through question number 175. Here's the situation to consider. A development team wants a managed database service that reduces infrastructure administration. Select the appropriate cloud service model to complete the sentence. For the first statement, Azure Cosmos DB is categorized primarily as the blank offering. For this one, the options are 1. Platform as a Service, PaaS, Infrastructure as a Service, IaaS, Software as a Service, SaaS, or Desktop as a Service, DaaS. For Statement 1, choose Platform as a Service, PaaS. A managed database platform removes operating system and server administration from the customer. A helpful shortcut is this. PaaS lets developers focus on applications and data rather than managing servers and operating systems. Question number 176. You need to provision a new Azure virtual machine while traveling. You only have access to a tablet running the Android operating system. Solution: you open a web browser on the tablet, navigate to the Microsoft Power Apps portal, and attempt to deploy the virtual machine from there. Does this meet the goal? Options: Option A, yes. Option B, no. In this case, choose option B, no. The Microsoft Power Apps portal is used for building low-code custom business applications, not for provisioning core Azure infrastructure like virtual machines. To deploy a VM from a tablet, you would use the Azure portal or Azure Cloud Shell. The other choices do not work because A. Approving this is incorrect because Power Apps does not manage Azure compute resources. The Azure portal, portal.azure.com, is the primary web-based management interface for deploying Azure resources. Let's take a look at question number 177. Next, let's move into Azure Service Health. Let's start with the scenario. An operations team wants information about Azure service incidents and maintenance. For each statement, select yes if the statement is true. Otherwise, select no. The first statement says, Azure Service Health provides a personalized view of Azure service issues that affect your subscriptions. The second statement says, Azure Service Health can notify administrators about upcoming planned maintenance. The third statement says, Azure Service Health automatically migrates virtual machines to another region before a predicted outage. The first statement is yes. Service Health filters events to those relevant to your subscriptions and resources. The second statement is yes. Service Health alerts can notify teams about planned maintenance and service issues. The third statement is no. Service Health informs and alerts. It does not perform automatic workload migration. Exam tip. Service Health reports Azure platform events. Resource Health shows the status of an individual resource. Question number 178. Let's go. Scenario. A company wants traffic to an Azure service to remain on private network paths. Select the appropriate networking feature to complete the sentence. Statement 1. To access a supported Azure service through a private IP address in a virtual network, configure other blank. For this one, the options are 1. Private endpoint, public endpoint, management group, or resource lock. For statement 1, choose private endpoint. Private endpoints provide private network connectivity to supported Azure services. Keep this point in mind for the exam. A public endpoint is reachable through a public IP. A private endpoint uses a private IP in a virtual network. Next up is question number 179. This is marked as a medium question. A company is planning identity services for cloud and hybrid users. For each statement, select yes if the statement is true. Otherwise, select no. Statement 1. User accounts managed in on-premises Active Directory domain services can be synchronized to Microsoft Entra ID. Statement 2. Microsoft Entra External ID can allow partner users to access shared resources using their own credentials. Statement 3. Microsoft Entra ID provides cloud-based identity and access management for Azure resources and applications. The answer here is yes. Synchronization supports a hybrid identity environment. The answer here is yes. External identities support collaboration with partners and guests using their existing identities. The answer here is yes. Microsoft Entra ID authenticates users and integrates with authorization controls such as Azure RBAC. The main takeaway is authentication verifies identity. Azure RBAC determines what an authenticated identity can access. Now for question number 180. A company is comparing Microsoft Entra ID and Microsoft Entra domain services. For each statement, select yes if the statement is true. Otherwise, select no. Now check statement 1. Microsoft Entra ID is a cloud-based identity and access management service. Now check statement 2. Microsoft Entra Domain Services provides managed domain join (LDAP) and Kerberos capabilities. Now check statement 3. Using Microsoft Entra ID requires customers to deploy and patch their own domain controller virtual machines. The first statement is yes. Microsoft Entra ID provides cloud identity and access management. The second statement is yes. Domain Services supplies managed traditional domain capabilities for compatible workloads. The third statement is no. Microsoft operates Microsoft Entra ID. Customer-managed domain controllers are not required. Here's a useful exam tip. Use domain services when applications need domain join, LDAP, Kerberos, or group policy compatibility. Let's focus on question number 181. This situation sets up the main requirement. A company is reviewing Azure geographic and resiliency concepts. Match each architectural concept to its description. Here are the items on the left. Left side choice 1, a geographic area that contains one or more Azure data centers. Left side choice 2, two Azure regions in the same geography associated for certain resiliency scenarios. Left side choice 3, a physically separated group of data centers within an Azure region. Left side choice 4, an isolated Azure environment designed for specific government or regulatory requirements. The right column contains. Choice A on the right is Azure region. Choice B on the right is region pair. Choice C on the right is availability zone. Choice D on the right is sovereign region. Use these pairings. A geographic area that contains one or more Azure data centers goes with Azure region. Two Azure regions in the same geography associated for certain resiliency scenarios goes with region pair. A physically separated group of data centers within an Azure region goes with availability zone. An isolated Azure environment designed for specific government or regulatory requirements goes with sovereign region. Here's why. A region is a geographic deployment area. A region pair links to regions for certain platform scenarios. An availability zone separates data center groups within a region, and a sovereign region serves specialized requirements. A helpful shortcut is this. Availability zones are within one region. Region pairs involve to separate regions. Take a careful look at question number 182. The focus now shifts to Azure Monitor. Look for the most important clue in this scenario. An operations team needs to investigate events and performance data collected from Azure resources. Select the appropriate Azure Monitor capability to complete the sentence. The first one reads, to run queries against collected log data from Azure resources, use the blank. Your choices are 1. Log Analytics, Azure Advisor, Azure Service Health, or Azure Pricing Calculator. Statement 1 should be completed with log analytics. Log analytics provides interactive querying and analysis of collected logs. Azure Monitor collects telemetry. Log analytics is used to query log data. Question number 183. Here's the scenario. A finance team is identifying factors that can affect Azure costs. For each statement, select yes if the statement is true. Otherwise, select no. The first statement says, the type and quantity of Azure resources consumed can affect total cost. The second statement says, the Azure region selected for a resource can affect its price. The third statement says, inbound and outbound data transfer are always billed at identical rates. The answer here is yes. Different services, SKUs, quantities, and usage durations have different charges. The answer here is yes. Prices can vary by region because service availability and operating costs differ. The answer here is no. Data transfer pricing depends on direction, route, service, and pricing plan. Exam tip. Use the Azure pricing calculator before deployment and cost management after deployment. Here comes question number 184. We are moving on to Azure Monitor. Here's what is happening. Your organization manages hundreds of Azure resources. You need a centralized platform to aggregate logs, metrics, and events to identify performance bottlenecks and troubleshoot issues. Which Azure service should you use to collect and analyze telemetry data from across your entire environment? Here are the options. Choice A, Azure Monitor. Choice B, Azure Analysis Services. Choice C, Azure Event Grid. Choice D, Azure Stream Analytics. Go with option A, Azure Monitor. Let's look at the reasoning. Azure Monitor is a comprehensive solution for collecting, analyzing, and acting on telemetry from cloud and on-premises environments. It consolidates metrics and logs into a central log analytics workspace. B. Azure Analysis Services provides enterprise-grade data models in the cloud, not operational telemetry collection. C. Azure Event Grid is a routing service for event-driven architectures, not a centralized log repository. D. Azure Stream Analytics is for real-time analytics on fast-moving data streams, not general resource monitoring. Keep this point in mind for the exam. Azure Monitor includes log analytics and application insights as core components of its telemetry suite. Next up is question number 185. Consider this situation. An application runs on multiple Azure virtual machines and must remain available if one Azure data center fails. Solution: you deploy the virtual machines across two availability zones in the same Azure region. Does this meet the goal? Option A, yes. Option B, no. The answer here is option A, yes. This works because availability zones are physically separated data center groups within a region. Distributing instances across zones protects against a failure affecting one zone. Now let's rule out the other options. B. Deploying across multiple zones is the intended approach for resilience to a localized data center or zone failure. The main takeaway is availability zones improve resilience within a region, cross-region designs address regional failures. Question number 186. Treat this as an easy question. Scenario. A company is designing private network connectivity for Azure resources. Select the appropriate purpose to complete the sentence. Now look at statement 1, Azure virtual networks are primarily used to the blank. Pick from 1. Create isolated private networks for Azure resources, organize billing invoices, assign product licenses to users, or store unstructured object data. The answer for statement 1 is create isolated private networks for Azure resources. Virtual networks provide private IP addressing, segmentation, and connectivity for Azure resources. Here's a useful exam tip. Resource groups organize resources. Virtual networks provide network isolation and connectivity. Now let's examine question number 187. First, let's review the situation. A finance team is reviewing basic Azure cost concepts. For each statement, select yes if the statement is true. Otherwise, select no. Now check statement 1. Creating an empty Azure resource group by itself does not create a recurring usage charge. Now check statement 2. The quantity and duration of resource usage can affect Azure costs. Now check statement 3. Resource tags can help organize cost reports but do not directly reduce the unit price of a resource. Statement 1 should be marked yes. Resource groups are logical containers and do not have a standalone usage charge. Statement 2 should be marked yes. Consumption-based billing reflects the amount and duration of resources used. Statement 3 should be marked yes. Tags add business context for grouping and analyzing costs. They do not change prices. A helpful shortcut is this. Tags support cost allocation and reporting, not price discounts. Now for question number 188. Next, let's move into public cloud. A local business is evaluating whether to replace its aging on-premises servers with Microsoft Azure. What is a defining characteristic of a public cloud deployment compared to an on-premises network? Review the options. Option A. Computing resources are owned by a third-party provider and shared among multiple independent organizations. Option B. Cloud resources are collectively owned and maintained by the general public. Option C. All data hosted in a public cloud is freely accessible to anyone on the internet without authentication. Option D. A public cloud requires organizations to purchase and install their own physical servers in the provider's data center. The right response is option A. Computing resources are owned by a third-party provider and shared among multiple independent organizations. This is the best choice because in a public cloud, the provider owns and operates the physical infrastructure and offers securely isolated resources to multiple customers. The remaining options can be eliminated because B. The infrastructure is owned by a cloud provider, not collectively by the public. C. Public cloud resources still require authorization and are not freely accessible. D. Customers consume provider-owned infrastructure instead of installing their own servers in the provider data center. Public cloud describes provider ownership and multi-tenant delivery. It does not mean public access to customer data. Here comes question number 189. Consider this situation. A company wants to estimate, monitor, and categorize Azure spending. For each statement, select yes if the statement is true. Otherwise, select no. Statement 1. Azure Cost Management can analyze spending and create budgets. Statement 2. The Azure Pricing Calculator can estimate expected costs before resources are deployed. Statement 3. Resource tags can help group costs by department, project, or environment. For statement 1, choose yes. Cost management provides cost analysis, budgets, alerts, and reporting capabilities. For statement 2, choose yes. The pricing calculator estimates costs from planned service configurations. For statement 3, choose yes. Tags add business context that can be used in cost analysis and allocation. Exam tip. Use tags consistently so cost reports can be grouped by business ownership or workload. Let's continue with question number 190. The focus now shifts to Azure policy. Take a moment to review this scenario. An organization needs to enforce location standards across Azure resources. Select the appropriate governance tool to complete the sentence. For the first statement, to restrict resource deployments to approved Azure regions and assess compliance, use the blank. Choose between 1. Azure Policy, Azure Role-Based Access Control, RBAC, Resource Locks, or Azure Service Health. The first statement uses Azure Policy. Azure Policy enforces standards and reports compliance at scale. Keep this point in mind for the exam. Azure RBAC controls who can act. Azure Policy controls which resource configurations are allowed. Question number 191. Here's the scenario. A company is planning an Azure deployment and wants an estimate before creating any resources. Which tool should the company use? The choices are: Choice A, Azure Pricing Calculator. Choice B, Azure Service Health. Choice C, Azure Policy. Choice D, Microsoft Purview. In this case, choose option A, Azure Pricing Calculator. The main reason is the Azure Pricing Calculator estimates expected costs based on selected services, regions, sizes, and usage assumptions. Let's quickly check the incorrect choices. B. Azure Service Health reports service incidents and maintenance. C. Azure Policy enforces governance rules and assesses compliance. D. Microsoft Purview supports data governance and discovery. The main takeaway is use pricing calculator for estimates and cost management for actual spending, budgets, and analysis. Next up is question number 192. Here's what is happening. A team is reviewing common benefits of cloud services. For each statement, select yes if the statement is true. Otherwise, select no. Now check statement 1. High availability helps keep a service accessible when individual components fail. Now check statement 2. Predictability helps organizations forecast cloud performance and costs. Now check statement 3. Scalability means cloud resources can only be increased and can never be reduced. Statement 1 should be marked yes. High availability designs reduce downtime when components fail. Statement 2 should be marked yes. Predictable performance and costs improve planning and budgeting. Statement 3 should be marked no. Scalability can increase or decrease capacity to match demand. Here's a useful exam tip. Scalability changes capacity, elasticity emphasizes dynamically matching capacity to demand. Let's continue with question number 193. This question takes us into Defender for Cloud. Take a moment to review this scenario. A security team is evaluating Microsoft Defender for Cloud. For each statement, select yes if the statement is true. Otherwise, select no. The first statement says, Microsoft Defender for Cloud provides recommendations to improve the security posture of cloud resources. The second statement says, Microsoft Defender for Cloud can help assess workloads in Azure, on-premises environments, and other clouds. The third statement says, Microsoft Defender for Cloud replaces Microsoft Entra ID as the authentication service for Azure. The first statement is yes. Defender for Cloud assesses configurations and recommends security improvements. The second statement is yes. Its cloud security posture capabilities can cover hybrid and multi-cloud workloads. The third statement is no. Microsoft Entra ID provides authentication. Defender for Cloud focuses on security posture and workload protection. A helpful shortcut is this. Microsoft Entra ID handles identity, while Defender for Cloud evaluates and improves workload security. You have completed part 5 of the AZ-900 practice question series. Continue your preparation by opening the complete playlist and watching the remaining parts in sequence. Please like this video, subscribe to Tech with Kaushik, and enable notifications for more cloud certification exam preparation content. Share your score, questions, or feedback in the comments. Thank you for watching. See you in the next part.